Hello, and welcome back to the summer series by Inspiring Workplaces in partnership with H&H. It's our fourth year now, which also means 4 years out of the start of the pandemic, so every year it gets a little bit better. And we've decided to revamp the format, both to bring you more stories every day, but in a shorter, more succinct time frame of 1 week instead of a story every day over 2 weeks. We've also done that to protect the team a little bit because it's quite hard work doing a story a day for 2.5 weeks like we've been doing for the past 3 years. So we hope you enjoy the new format, twice as much every single day, an hour a day at the same time for the next 5 days. We offer all our content, our community, our events, all for free because we want to help you change the world through the world of work. That's our mission. And we will do anything, or almost anything, I should probably say, in our power to try and help you do that too. We have a lot of updates from Inspiring Workplaces, but I'm going to save them until further into the week because I'm just very excited about the two storytellers we have today and the stories they're going to share, and just want to get started, as I'm sure you do too. So, to our first storyteller, he's a 2-time Sunday Times bestseller, and in my opinion, and only my opinion, he's fearless with the content he puts out there and the debate he encourages to drive real change. His talk today is on resisting the return to the office. Why we're getting the in-office debate wrong. I don't really want to give any more away than that, and rather just welcome to the stage Bruce Daisley. How are you? Welcome. Thank
Very
you.
well, thank you. Thanks for involving me in the summer series. Is it summer?
Well,
remind me, it's summerish.
It should be summer somewhere. Just not, I think, either where you or I are. So, but yeah, like I say, I'd love to just leave you to it and let you share your opinions.
Fabulous. I'm going to go through my slides today. I've actually just added something else to the presentation set, which is a QR code. So I'll show that at the end, and that allows you to take a look at my slides and download my slides. So I'm going to sort of present now, but I'm also going to give you the chance to download my slides afterwards. And that's specifically because there's a few things I'm going to show you that have got data in them or have got articles in them that I think it's possible you might want to read, or you might want to challenge my perspective and challenge my take on that. So let me dive in. And today's chat really is just, I think, about this theme that is persisting, which is the constant sense that some of our bosses want us to reflect and maybe embark upon a return to the office. And the reason why I say that is I deal with teams all the time. I often have culture discussions with senior leadership teams at organizations, and one of the things that they often articulate to me is that they want the team back in the office more. They don't think that the way they're working at the moment is producing great results. That is probably partly enhanced by the fact that we're in something of an economic downturn, that times are difficult. So let me go in and reflect on this moment and where we are right now. So look, the first thing I'd say is that there's two simultaneous truths about the way that we're working right now. And the first is that workplace culture feels more fragmented than ever before. And simultaneously, flexibility is the most popular innovation to happen to work really in the last 50 years, and it's barely any point going much beyond that. Let me show you two other data points that I think reflect this moment and partly capture those themes. The first is that you might have seen back 10 months ago, there was a piece of work done by KPMG, international work. So this is the UK cut on it, but broadly the numbers are the same, whichever country you look at. 2/3 of chief execs think that we're going to end up by 2028. So what's that? Another 4 years' time, we're going to end up in a 5-day office. So, really critical that they think this isn't working right now. That first point that I made, that senior leaders don't think that workplace culture is as cohesive or as energized as it previously was. The second thing to juxtapose against that is that 90% of workers don't want to go back to the way things were. So I think sort of taking that first slide and re-looking at it here, you can see that we've got this situation where there's a schism between what bosses think is working right now and how workers are feeling. And look, why are workers feeling like that? I saw this fabulous commencement speech, probably by the sort of Charles Dickens of television. If you watch shows like Bridgerton or Scandal or How to Get Away with Murder, you probably have read the name Shonda Rhimes, who is the showrunner, the producer for those shows. And she did a fabulous commencement speech where she was talking about her own life, actually. And she said, every time you see me succeeding at something, somewhere you can't see, I'm failing at something else. Every time you see me winning, I'm losing somewhere else. Really interesting sort of framing. She says that, every time you see me on stage at the Emmys collecting an award, or every time you see me, you see photographs of me turning up for the last recording of Sandra Oh, the star of Grey's Anatomy. What you're missing is I didn't turn up to my mother's carer appointment, or I wasn't there for my child's soccer tournament. And it's a reflection that all of us have got this sort of conflict running through our lives, that we feel that we've got more commitments than we can live up to. And so I think the reason why 90% of workers don't want to go back to the way that things were before is that we all, to some extent, think that we've got some more balance to our work-life blend. We've succeeded a little bit more by the fact that flexibility has come along. But let's sort of reflect on where this has left us. And like I say, I'm going to give you a link to all the slides in a second. And one of the things you'll see is a link to this article that was about 4 weeks ago in the Wall Street Journal. The article link, if you come to the slide afterwards, is going to be on that thing there that says article link. And this article is a truly fabulous read because I think it tries to capture the sort of the moment of work we're in right now. The moment we're in of work right now. This article is called "The Loneliness of the American Worker," and sort of worth contextualizing it. Firstly, that by contextualizing it, that these figures are reflected in UK workers, in European workers, in wherever you're consuming this. So this isn't exclusively a US thing. Loneliness is a very typical experience of current work, and 40% of UK workers say they don't have a single friend at work. So loneliness of the worker. The interesting thing about this article is I suspect if you sent the headline to your boss, or maybe if you saw this article yourself, you might make a conclusion that, oh yeah, I know what is causing loneliness at work. And I suspect people would jump to the idea that the fact that the workforce now works remotely, that we spend 2 or 3 days away from each other every week, it was the cause of this. The really interesting thing about this, and I think the reason why you'll enjoy reading the article, is that that's not borne out by the data. People who work fully on site all of the time, so people who are in the office or the workplace 5 days a week, are equally as lonely as people who work hybrid or work fully remote. So it's not necessarily the where of work that's causing the problems. There seems to be something else going on. There seems to be something that's creating this sense of loneliness. And I want you sort of just to go on and reflect on that. In fact, on the subject of these themes, you'll find a link to that one there in the notes at the end. This was an article in the Atlantic last week, and I think if we're thinking about the causes of loneliness at the work, this article by Derek Thompson is possibly better at trying to ascribe the responsibility. This article, he says, it's called "White Collar Work is Just Meetings Now," and I think that's the critical consideration, because when we look into the experience of work right now, this is data from Microsoft and Nick Bloom. Most workers who work in a hybrid capacity describe their work being made up by 50% of their week is in meetings. And I think if we're going to try and work out why work doesn't feel as connected as before, it's this paradoxical thing that we most of us find our time now being consumed with scheduled meetings. There's no chance interactions, or there's no opportunities just to talk to someone on the go. We spend our times really just going through, as Derek Thompson says, a work that's simply become meetings right now. Look, to put this into numbers, into context, Microsoft say, using their Teams data, that since the since the start of the pandemic, the amount of time we spend in meetings has gone up threefold. So we've found that work has really been consumed by our calendars. And I think this is a really critical consideration. When I put some of this research out a couple of months ago, the thing that I really tried to emphasize is that if we're trying to fix workplace culture, if we're trying to make work more agreeable, actually we should start with calendars, not with, we should think about our calendars. We shouldn't necessarily think about our offices. So it's not necessarily that if a boss is saying we want the team to be in a better place, that we should be thinking about getting the team back into the workplace more, but could we do anything to try and rewind the clock on this, to try and sort of create a more familiar version of work from the past? Look, because one of the things that I hear repeatedly from the teams I work with is one of the challenges with an RTO mandate. One of the challenges of people saying, bosses saying you need to be in the office more. You can have these unstructured water cooler moments. You can have more interactions. People say this to me. I hear this repeatedly. They say, I came into the office and I sat at my desk on Teams calls all day. Really familiar that actually work has become something that maybe when we're trying to diagnose a cure isn't necessarily the version of work that we're imagining and characterizing in our head. I want to give you a couple of pointers, because if we're thinking about how to make work better, there's actually, in some of the data that we've got, there's some really interesting evidence that might give us pointers for how we can fix things. First place I want to start is the role of the manager. Now, really interestingly, if you are interested in workplace research, Gallup publishes an annual global workplace report. Came out, the latest one just came out just at the end of June, so relatively recent data. And this data, they look, I think, at about 120 different countries around the world. You can go in and for free, you can take a look at all of this stuff. And one of the things that they strongly concluded this year was that the role of the manager is largely instrumental in creating our engagement with our jobs. When we're predicting the engagement of workers, 70% of their engagement comes from whether their manager is engaged or not. And one of the things that I think is most critical, we think about workplace engagement, we think about how people can be connected with their jobs. And really interestingly, they found that 80% of the people, 4 out of 5 of the people who were engaged with their job, say that they've received direct feedback from their boss this week. Feeling seen by our bosses and feeling like our bosses are engaged in their job seems to be a really critical component of us feeling engaged in ourselves and our job. Now, of course, when we might be thinking of this and diagnosing this, actually that idea that we maybe jumped to the conclusion that we wanted people back in the office, it doesn't actually seem as relevant as trying to get the management balance right. What's the other thing? Well, the main thing that you're probably familiar with this, the main thing that comes out of the Gallup Global Workplace Report is that the biggest predictor of whether someone is engaged in their job is do they have a close friend at work? I sort of the actual research asks the question, do you have a best friend at work? But some people feel a bit anxious about ascribing someone as their best friend. But do you have a friend at work in some capacity, a sense of connection? And I think actually, if you think about this alongside that research about managers, both of them speak to the same thing. Let me use what I think is a really helpful tool. I often think about this, when we're thinking about that role of a friend, why would having a friend at work matter? I saw this, which is a beautiful articulation of this. It's a description of friendship by a British Irish poet called David White. And it's poetry, so it's going to be a bit floral, but let's have a look. Friendship is the privilege of having been seen by someone and the equal privilege of having been granted the sight of the essence of another. Okay, so it's poetic, but I think there's something really powerful in it, because if we're thinking, why on earth would having a friend at work lead to us feeling more engaged with our job? It goes to the heart of just feeling like our work matters, but that we've been seen by someone, that if we've had a bad day, we've got the opportunity to go and talk to someone. But Actually, I think this goes to the heart of that management thing as well. When I said to previously that feeling like someone has had feels engaged with their job if they've had direct feedback from their boss. Well, I guess that feels like people want to feel seen. And I think things go to right to the heart of deep psychological needs. So look, what would that say? Well, I guess maybe if we were thinking about a previous era of work, then that would have more easily been accomplished when we were in the office. But now we've established that flexible working is one of the most popular things for our team, for retention, for energizing our team, then probably we need to think about how do we achieve that sense that people feel seen without having to force upon them an hour's commute every morning and an hour's commute every evening. How can we create a sense that people are seen and feel understood and feel connected? And I think, this is sort of the critical lesson about where work is right now. I'm always reminded of this, and I think there's a really critical consideration here that if any of us are trying to create workplace culture, culture typically lives in the gaps between things rather than in scheduled moments. So, as calendar and scheduled meetings go up massively, well, don't be surprised if culture seems squeezed out. If you've got members of your team saying that they are in back-to-back meetings all day, they've just had a new training module drop into their inbox, they've got lots of emails. Don't be surprised if one of the things that disappears from that is a sense of connection and interaction. Really beautiful research that was done by a group just trying to understand the impact of night work, actually. So there was a piece of work done trying to study the different experiences of warehouse workers who were working in a supermarket warehouse, and railway workers. So, okay, superficially, two very different groups of workers to maybe people working in an office environment. But they were just wanting to understand the elements of the job that were having an impact on the sense of purpose, the sense of motivation, the sense of connection that were taking place. And what was really interesting was that the warehouse workers, the supermarket warehouse workers, had headphones on because it was quite a noisy environment. And as a result of that, they were communicated to each other through headphones. The railway workers were out working all night actually on railway tracks, but the typical thing that characterized their day is that they frequently sat down and had a coffee break with each other. They sat down once every shift and ate with each other. The really interesting thing to juxtaposing those two things, what was found though was that the railway workers had a really passionate sense of culture, connection, real strong sense of purpose. They knew that their work was important to getting people to where they needed to be, about keeping the railway safe. Why? Because they were just sitting down and spending that time together. Culture exists in the gaps between things. In contrast, the warehouse workers felt disconnected, lonely, were far more likely to quit, often felt that they was in a sort of state of managed depression, really. They just felt completely isolated from each other. And actually, well, our jobs might be different to that. Recognizing those core elements are really critical. Actually, it's a really interesting exploration into one of the consequences of the 4-day week. One of the consequences of the 4-day week is broadly organizations say you can't just switch on the 4-day week. You need to transition to it. You need to some extent, sort of rebalance how work is constructed. If you're going to try and achieve as much in 4 days as you did in 5, you just can't simply presume that the same practices will get there. And one of the things that people talk about for going to the 4-day week is they say work intensity goes up. And one of the things that's pushed out is socialization. So it's really interesting. Like holistically, 4-day week might be better for our lives. It might be better for society. But for work cohesion, you need to work a little bit harder to try and keep that sense of social connection. I think it's a really vital lesson. All of this is to say that when we're talking about how work things, we need to understand holistically how it all works. The other thing to emphasize, while we're on the point of things living in the gaps, is that imagination lives in the gaps. And specifically, what I mean by this is that if you're the sort of person who finds yourself in back-to-back meetings all day, or your whole schedule is just jam-packed with calendar demands on you, you probably won't be as creative and as imaginative as maybe you believe that you're capable of. And there's just lovely examples of this. If we were going to do sort of a rudimentary exercise in neuroscience, one of the things that we'd conclude is that the brain has three systems of cognition, but the one that seems to be most attuned with our sense of imagination and creativity is what's sometimes styled the default network. It's when we're in a state of boredom, and you know, you might find yourself thinking you always have your best ideas when you're staring out of a window or walking the dog or waiting for the kettle to boil. And in fact, there's really good evidence of that. My favorite example of that is a guy called Aaron Sorkin, who's a screenwriter. He realized he was having all his best ideas in the shower. And it's just a good example. He says he takes 6 to 8 showers a day, but it's just a good example of a lot of magic exists in the gaps between things. If you find yourself scheduling too much, you might find that some of the magic of work and workplace culture and your own imagination is forced out. So look, you know, how might we think about this? Well, I'm coming to the end of my discussion here, but you know, it's a real strong manifesto for aggressively reducing meeting time. And look, you know, in the slides, if you download them afterwards, you'll see this evidence. This is a lovely piece of work that was done by researchers in the UK and France. They took 80 organizations, had to have at least 1,000 employees each, and they tracked them when they introduced 1 meeting-free day and 2 meeting-free days. And what you'll find in the data there is that 1 meeting-free day saw an increase in productivity and an increase in engagement, and people's levels of stress went down. In fact, the only thing better than a meeting-free day was 2 meeting-free days. And I think if any of us are sort of trying to manage the way that work is constructed right now, the mistake we might make is thinking we need to be back in the office more. Actually, rethinking our relationship with our calendars is probably a far more potent way to think about being intentional about designing work. From our own perspective, maybe if you can't introduce a meeting-free day, one thing that a lot of people have found is that scheduling a 1-hour meeting with yourself, a monk mode, where you have no interruptions, no distractions, and you try and get work done. People have found that ability to focus and get work done seems to put them in a far more productive and present frame of mind. So let me just put if I can switch to the other slide, but feel free to download this. You can either get the slides by going to the URL tinyurl.com/inspiring-b, or you can go to that QR code and you'll be able to get all of my slides there. So if there are any data points that you feel you just want to double tap into that, or you maybe want to read that Wall Street Journal article, you'll find all of that there. What's the point I'd make then? I think, you know, we are very much in a moment where discussions about return to office mandates feel timely, feel like they're being brought back to the agenda by senior leaders. And the only thing I would strongly emphasize is that to some extent, we've also got to recognize in the last 5 years is not only have we got the massive dividend of working flexibly, but meeting time has trebled. As Derek Thompson says, office jobs principally now have become meetings. If we want to reinvent our work, thinking about that rather than where the work is done is actually the most productive thing to do. Reinventing workplace culture right now is about calendars, not about buildings.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Bruce. Lot to unpack there, and I'm very grateful that you've shared the QR code for those that want to download your slides. I think the theme that really came through at the end for me was obviously one of those words that sprung up in the past year or two is the intentionality. So if it is going to be about calendars and, you know, monk mode, giving people the space in the gaps. I've been reading a book recently you wouldn't think to look to, but Arnold Schwarzenegger. You mentioned Aaron Sorkin, but he's talking about, you know, he's quite a successful guy, really. And you look through everything he's achieved. And one of the things I was reading only yesterday was giving yourself space. So, and he then talks about walking the dog or whatever works for you. So Sorkin's a shower. Seinfeld had a notepad by the side of his bed because that's where all his jokes came up when he was sleeping. So, but I think being able to work out what works well for your team and give them space and be intentional about it, I think sounds like a very, very good place to start. And reframing it, like you just said, from calendars to return to office. You know, lot springing off in my head now. So yeah, I really appreciate the talk, and I will be putting this out on demand as well. So for those that want to watch it and come back to it and keep watching it. So really, really appreciate it, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Cheers, Bruce. So what a great way to start the summer series. Lots going on in my head right now, trying to unpack everything that Bruce took us through, but no time to pause. We're going to go straight into our second storyteller, and one that's been a fixture at our events, both offline when we used to do big conferences, and now online, so we can reach more of you at where you are at your desks. Why have we had this person back again? Because she says yes, which is fantastic, but she is an authority on workplace strategy and has multiple best-selling books to prove it. This session is called Bad Boss, What You're Going to Do? We're going to try and start singing, and nobody wants that right now. And a bit of the background to the talk is the majority of bosses don't wake up in the morning and say to themselves, today is a great day to ruin my people's lives. But the reality is that 99.6% of people have had a bad boss. I'm definitely one of those 99.6. And 57% leave their job because of their boss. Again, I think something we can all relate to. And I feel like this talk probably is a really nice follow-up to what we just heard from Bruce as well. So without further ado, please welcome to the summer series, Debra Corrie.
Hi there.
Hello.
I love it. I'm a fixture. There we go. I'm going to take that as a compliment, or that I say yes, one or the other.
In the best way possible. That is a huge compliment. So thank you so much for being here. And without further ado, I will leave you to get on with it.
Sounds great. Thanks. Okay, let's get those slides going. Here we go. Perfect. So yeah, I'm here today to talk about bosses. Good bosses, great bosses, and bad bosses. You could probably figure that out from the title, though, couldn't you? And I'm going to start with this idea of bad bosses, and I wanted to do that for two reasons. First of all, because we have a problem. Matt talked a little bit about that already. But also, I'm a big believer that you talk about something when you have a solution, and I have a solution. So I'm going to share with you from my latest book. So Matt shared these pieces of data, but I want to share them and give you a bit of context. So there's lots of data out there. I'm sure you've seen it before about the impact of a bad boss, how they can negatively impact motivation, happiness, engagement, and even well-being. So we've been seeing this for years. So when we decided to write our book, we wanted to do a bit of research about how big a problem is this? So how many bad bosses are there out there? So we did two surveys. The first survey, we went out globally and we said, have you had a bad boss? And it was surprising. I expected the number to be high, but I don't think I expected it to be that high. 99.6%. You read that right. Almost every single person has had a bad boss. But then we also went out to bosses of all levels and we said, have you been a bad boss? And Matt raised his hand. I'm going to raise my hand. My co-author is going to raise his hand. And I'm just pleased to hear that actually 80% of people admitted that, you know what, I've been a bad boss. So we definitely have a problem and it's not going away. And the reason I say that is that we asked people how long you've been in the workplace because we were hoping, I was really, really hoping that we would find that people entering the workforce over the last year, 2 years, they wouldn't have had bad bosses, but the numbers have not changed. So this basically says we need to do something about this because what we're doing now is not working. So what you gonna do? Well, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna share with you 3 steps, or what we call the 3 A's, to help all bosses be great. Because that is my ultimate goal. That is what I'm on a mission to do, is to make sure that bosses out there are not making the mistakes that I've made throughout my career, or that other people who've been kind enough to share their stories with me have made, because I want to set everyone else up to be a great boss. So these are the 3 A's, and they are all about making sure that you have awareness, acceptance, and action. And if I think about one of the main reasons why we have so many bad bosses, it's partly because too often we, and I say this myself, I've done it, is we jump into action mode. We're like, someone's struggling, let's send them to a training course, let's buy them a new book. And I think that's the problem. If we don't first start with awareness and acceptance, nothing is ever going to change. And that is hopefully my biggest takeaway for you today, which is don't jump into action. Take a step back, help your bosses understand what awareness and acceptance are and what they can be. So the first one that I want to share, as I said, is awareness. And there's 2 parts of it. Be aware of why it's happening. Why is it happening to me? And then also, what does it look like? So 3 reasons why I've seen it happen, okay? And the first one has to do with this concept of that we don't even know that we're a bad boss. It's happened to me before. I think I'm doing a great job, a good job, and all of a sudden I find out that actually I'm not doing as well as I thought. In the book, I share, probably the first story I share is a very embarrassing story of a big mistake that I made. I actually just posted that story on Forbes last week. So yeah, we're all making these mistakes. We're not aware of it. So we don't even know that we're a bad boss. The second reason why it's happening to us is, let's be real. We all have such diverse workforces. Our people have such different needs. So we might be a great boss to one person. We might be a good boss to one person, and we might be a bad boss to someone else. So again, no wonder things are not always working as well as we'd like them to day in and day out. And then the third reason is that, again, let's be real, the world keeps changing on us, and we might not all have the skills at a certain time and place to deal with a person, to deal with a situation, to be a great boss. So those are 3 of the things that are causing us to fall into these traps of being a bad boss. Now, one of the things that really, really pisses me off is when people just say you're doing something wrong. Or when we talk about bad bosses, we talk about those caricatures or, what we see on movies or in cartoons, those horrible, horrible bosses. And I really don't believe that that's the majority. I think that is the minority. I think those are the kind of people that, let's be honest, they are never going to change. They don't think they're doing anything wrong. They don't want to change. They are the people you do not want in your organization. The rest of the people, and that's who I'm really speaking to, are what I call unintentional bad bosses. Those people who, like I just shared before, don't know they're doing it wrong, might not know how to handle every situation, and they might not have the skills. But we really need to take a step back and think about, what does it look like? So what we tried to do is we tried to give them names. We tried to give them faces. We tried to give them definitions. And that's what's on this slide. These are what we call the 10 types of bad bosses. And in our survey, we asked people about them. And every single one of these had at least 50% of people saying that they've had a boss that is this type of bad boss. In fact, it was more like 60 or 70% of people had each of these types of bad bosses. If we're in person, I would ask you, which do you think was the most common? The answer actually was really frustrating to me, because the answer was the unappreciator. 81% of people said they've had a bad boss who's an unappreciator. It's frustrating to me because my last 2 books I wrote about this are about appreciation. But I think it sort of ties into what Bruce was talking about, how people want to feel like they're seen, like they're valued, that their boss is actually noticing them and showing appreciation to them. And it's not happening. So that was the first most common type. The next 2 tied for 80%. One is the micromanager. I am a recovering micromanager. And that to me sounded about right, because I think a lot of us, when we first become a manager, we sort of fall into the trap of being a micromanager. And then the other one, which was 80%, was the avoider, which again did not surprise me, because if you think about what Bruce was talking about, a lot of managers are forced in these situations of, managing people who might be working remotely, might be working hybrid. Then we get technology with AI and everything. So they're avoiding situations. They don't have time for people. Maybe they're stuck in meetings like Bruce was talking about, or they don't have the skill set to be able to manage people, so they're avoiding their people. So those are the three most common. The others are things like the ignorer, the hoarder, the pretender, the blocker, the firefighter, the blamer, and the coercer. But again, all very common types of bad bosses. I wanted to share something with you, to give something back to you. When we were writing the book, we thought, wouldn't it be great if we could help people be more aware by giving them some type of questions they could answer, and then it would lead them and help them understand what they're doing well and where the areas that need to focus on. So we created this boss trait assessment tool. It's 100% confidential, 100% personal. We don't even ask for emails. So by all means, the link here is badbossesruinlives.com assessment. By all means, you can use it, give it to your people. It really will help you get a better feel for which of these 10 types of bad bosses you have. So once you have this awareness of, okay, you know what, I might have a bit of a problem, and awareness of these are the types of bad boss traits, next thing to do is to accept and embrace them. A couple of things to think about while you're doing this and while your bosses are doing this. The first thing to accept is that it's not all or nothing. There's shades of gray. And what I mean by that is, let's take the hoarder, for example. A hoarder is someone who doesn't share information with their people. Now, you could be a hoarder that shares absolutely nothing, or you could be a hoarder who, you know what, maybe I'm really good at sharing, good news, but I'm not very comfortable. I don't have the skills to share something that's either negative or a bit challenging or controversial. So there are shades of gray. Some of them ruin lives when you get it wrong. Others, it just makes things a bit more complex and much more difficult for your people. So that's one thing to think about with the bad boss types. The second thing to think about is that it's not either or. So you're not a hoarder or an ignorer. You're not an unappreciator or a micromanager. Actually, we did a survey and we looked across at how many types of bad boss types people ticked. On average, it was somewhere around 5 or 6, which means we're all going to have a couple different types of bad boss traits. And part of the reason is that sometimes one leads to the other. So for example, if you're an avoider, you're avoiding people, you're not giving them feedback, you might not be listening to them. That might lead into possibly an ignorer. It might lead into an unappreciator. So it's really important to think about that, which is another reason we really need to tackle these bad boss traits so that they don't have this domino effect and all of a sudden we end up having 10 types of bad boss traits at once. That's when it's going to cause problem. If you have 1 or 2, you work on it, you move on. The next thing to think about is that it's not static. And what I mean by that is things are going to change. Situations are going to change. Your people are going to change. Your people's lives are going to change. Work demands are going to change. So it's really important to constantly assess yourself and accept what's going on. So don't just say, okay, I've done the assessment test. I know that I'm a micromanager. Work on it, fix it, move on. Constantly revisit and think about, do you know what? Things are really tough at work right now. Maybe I'm doing a little bit of hoarding, or maybe I've gotten so busy I've forgotten to appreciate my people. So remember, you have to constantly look and assess and accept where you are. And then the last thing, I think this is really important, and you'll notice I forgot to say this with the emojis on the other page, is we purposely made these emojis a little bit cute, a little bit fun, because we didn't want people to, look at them and think, oh my gosh, that's not me. That's evil. And I am not evil. As I said before, most of us who have these bad boss traits, it's unintentional. So it's really important for us to accept that, you know what, even the best of the best bosses are going to get it wrong from time to time. The reason I have the firefighter emoji up there is that one of the best bosses I ever had. I mean, this boss was amazing. When we were writing the section on firefighter, I wrote it thinking of this boss, because this particular boss was definitely a firefighter. They just loved going from exciting project to exciting project and throw us from fire to fire. And you know what? That was the only thing they did wrong. We lived with it. We learned how to deal with it. The world didn't end. The person was still a great boss. So again, we need to accept that we're going to get it wrong from time to time. So we started out with awareness, right? We moved on to acceptance. Now it's time to take action. I know everybody wants to jump to action, as I said before. And if anyone's read any of my other books, you'll know that I do love a good model. So I'm going to share with you a model. This is what we call the Great Boss Building Block Model. And it's basically 14 building blocks, 14 tools that we as bosses all have to use. It's a tool. It helps us build engagement, motivation, all of the positives that we need as a boss. And all of them work together to do this. Now, there's 14 of them, but we've broken them into 2 types of building blocks. We have the ones on the bottom, the purple ones on the bottom. There's 6 of them. They're the foundation. I affectionately call them the 6-pack because they sort of hold up the others. Things like empathy and compassion, authenticity and vulnerability, and respect and trust. As we all know, we've seen the difference that these make and how important it is to lay the foundation with these types of behaviors. But then the other ones, the other 8, are the supporting blocks. And these are the tools, these are the actions that we need to take from time to time to overcome our bad boss traits. Things like listening and communication, feedback and appreciation, development and coaching, and empowerment and inspiration. You'll notice that they sit side by side, and that's because each building block has a pair, a partner, and they work together because they're going in the same direction, sometimes in different ways. So for example, feedback and appreciation is a type of feedback. It's more of that positive. So these are the 14 building blocks that we hope that you can use in your organizations. And I say that because what I would love for you to do is take a picture of this, or you will get the slides, take a picture of this and think about, how do these all fit into my learning and development programs? How can I make sure that if I have a boss that says, do you know what? I really need to focus on feedback, or I really need to focus on authenticity and vulnerability, you have programs in place and tools in place to help them do that. So a couple of things that I want to suggest when it comes to these building blocks. And again, think about it as you're looking at your programs as they relate specifically to them. The first one, and this goes along with Matt said at the beginning about changing the world. The first thing I would love for you to do is to challenge each of these individual building blocks. So if you have a course on feedback, for example, I really want you to take a step back. Think about all the things I talked about where bosses are having problems, how the world is changing. And I want you to think about, do I have it pitched at the right level, or do I need to challenge myself and think about, how can I evolve this? My second book that I wrote is called The Rebel Playbook, and I use this phrase all the time about joining the revolution. I want you to join the revolution and make sure that your building blocks will help your people have the skills they need to overcome these bad boss traits. The second thing is to make sure that your people are focusing on what's right for them. Sending every single person to all 14 courses or 20 courses or however many courses is not going to help them. It's too many to manage. Have them focus on, where are the areas that I really need to develop and where should I focus my time? And when they get that, then by all means, move on to another. But I think, again, what's holding us back is trying to develop too many areas at once. We're all human beings. We can probably do 1, 2, 3 things well. Anytime we do that, we get into overload mode. So focus. And then the last one is to remember that it's going to take work and practice. And what I mean by that is, it goes back to what I said at the beginning. We are going to stumble. We are going to fall. We are going to make mistakes. And we need to really make sure that our employees know that we have their back and we're going to support them and we're going to help them in the journey that they're doing. And I thought I would share a story to illustrate this. It's something that happened to me. I got promoted from a more junior level manager to a more senior level manager. And all of a sudden I had more people reporting to me. I had more projects. I had more pressure. And I'll be honest with you, I was not the best version of myself. I was not dealing with this pressure well. My alter ego came out. My alter ego's name is Debbie. And she definitely was coming out. But luckily, I was aware of it. And I saw that this was happening. And I saw that if I continued acting this way, it would have a huge negative impact on my employees. So I raised my hand. I told my employees, I pulled them together and I said, you know what, guys, I'll be honest with you. Until I get the skills that I need to be able to deal with this, Debbie is going to come out from time to time. So I asked them, how do you want to deal with this? What's the best thing to do? And we ended up deciding, this is back when I had an office, we decided to create this sign that says, Debbie is in the office, enter at your own risk. And that way people knew that, you know what, maybe I don't want to come in and ask Debbie a question. Maybe I'll wait until Debra is there. And I just, again, wanted to share that just to make the point that it's okay. It goes back to authenticity and vulnerability. It's okay to let your people know that, you know what, you might have some bad boss traits. You might be doing things wrong. It's going to be a journey. And also that you need their help. You need them to help you be aware of what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. So these are the 3 A's. Remember, start with awareness. Aware that, you know what, things aren't going right all the time. Aware of the 10 types of bad bosses. Accept which are the ones that I really need to focus on. And then action, roll up your sleeves, get those building blocks out and overcome them. Because at the end of the day, every boss deserves to be a great boss. We all want to be a great boss, and all of our people need us to be a great boss. So I've got one more slide. I'm sort of thinking I might need Matt to join me on this. I was going to sing this, but I'm not going to sing this. But I thought that since the title of this presentation was Bad Boss, What You Gonna Do? I thought that we should create a song. So this, you can sing along with me. You can read it along with me. But this is a summary of my presentation as a song. Are ready? Okay. Bad boss, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when your team feels blue? Bad boss, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they all blame you? Awareness, acceptance, and action we need to turn our bad habits into positive deeds. Look in the mirror, see the reflection, own our flaws, and make the correction. With these changes, we'll lead the right way and start every morning with today's the day. Ready to inspire, enrich, and lift the vibe, creating a thriving, engaged, and happy tribe. Thank you. That's it.
Well done.
Oh, Matt, you needed to come and join me on that.
Oh, well, no, I couldn't steal your limelight there. Well done. Very brave and inspiring. We actually did a video, which I might share tomorrow, just so we have a bit of togetherness. We rewrote the lyrics to Ring of Fire by Johnny Cash once. Thinking it might be quite good. Yours is better.
Not sure about that, but yeah.
Yeah. No,
thought it'd be a fun way to make the point.
I mean, I think this is just one of the most important topics, and will always be one of the most important topics until the robots fully take over. I think the management and people wanting to be a good boss, because sometimes they're, like you said, everything you've just said, they get put in positions and don't have the toolkit necessary to do that. And we need to assume positive intent of the ones that are trying. Because as your stats said, everybody's had a bad boss, but maybe that's on us to help create better bosses. And books like yours and the work that you do will help that and help people have better experiences. So I'm very, very grateful for what you do.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it really aligns with what Bruce was talking about, is looking at things differently, tilt your head. And instead of, pointing fingers and saying you're doing a bad job, see what we can do to support people and humanize it a bit. Make it okay to, say that you've made a mistake. Make it okay to admit that, you know what, I might need to work more on something. And also, I guess it goes back to the whole meeting idea. Also, give people room to do it. I think that's another big mistake that we make is we just say be a boss, and then we never give them the room to, grow into their greatness.
I for having heard both of your talks, I think there is a far greater, it's a sweeping statement, but a far greater sense of curiosity because we've had change thrust upon us through the pandemic, and coming out of it and return to office and looking at calendars versus the office and everything else that we've gone through. I do think there is a greater desire to be curious about how we can be more intentional and to solve these issues to create a better place to work. A lot to unpack there again. So I'm just very grateful. Very grateful. I just want to see if there's any comments from the audience. Just another person saying how fantastic you were. Thank you very much, Gregory. So yeah, thank you. Anything else you'd like to add before we sign off day one of the summer series?
No, I just, I think this is a great opportunity, the summer series, to just really take a step back and focus on what's important. I think we all get so busy sometimes, being able to look at this data and look at opportunities. And then we need to give ourselves the time to then go back and do something with it. Because it's great to spend a whole week listening, but then everybody needs to put time in their calendars and then diaries next week to say, what's the 1 or 2, 3 things that I'm going to do different next week? And I'm going to give everybody that goal and that challenge to do that. And by all means, write to me and let me know what your 1, 2, 3 things that you're going to do.
Definitely do that. Get in contact with Debra. Absolutely. Not Debbie.
No, not Debbie. No.
You're a recovering micromanager. I'm still recovering from a micromanager. So yeah, that's. But no, thank you so much. Have a great summer when it turns up, and we'll speak soon.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody that's been listening. I hope you've enjoyed the content. Lots of different ideas. Also, I think great ways of putting a story around the challenges that we face and the evolution of the workplace that's happening at a very, very fast pace. I'm just trying to absorb it all myself. We will be making these videos on demand, as we always do. We'll also be creating shorter clips to take out the main points of inspiration throughout the piece. Bruce's slides are available, as I think Debra's will become available. Everything will be on the website, either in our content section or the events page. And we'll be back again tomorrow at the exact same time, as we will be on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And we really look forward to delivering you some great learning and a bit more inspiration. But for now, thank you very much, wherever in the world you are tuning in from. Bye-bye.